After guests have finished their meal and left the table, what should be done with preset unwrapped utensils that appear to be unused? Utensils must be removed with dirty dishes, and utensils must be cleaned and sanitized. So even if the utensils haven't been touched, like the forks or spoons haven't been touched, they haven't been used, you still have to clean and sanitize them for the next time they are used. In which training method does a trainer ask a series of questions to draw on the knowledge and experience of the learners? So that type of method is called guided discussion. So when you're asking the person that you're trying to teach a lot of questions, like what would you do if a customer came up to you and asked for help? That's you trying to figure out how much do they know already. And that's also you helping them their brain work, helping them problem solve. And they could reply with, well, I would try to help them the best I can, but if I don't know, then I'll ask somebody I would ask like a manager to help me. See, that's you helping them problem solve. That's you helping them figure out what they should do in whatever situation they're in. What is the earliest a food handler diagnosed with jaundice can ever return to work? And like jaundice is a food symptom that's like the yellowing of the eyes, and that can be very contagious. So the earliest that somebody that has that type of symptom or jaundice can come back to work is 7 days after contracting the disease. That's the earliest they can come back, 7 days. What are the roles of federal, state, and local agencies regarding the regulations of food safety in operations? So what are the jobs? What do your local food, federal, state, and agencies do? Well, they create the food safety laws from the Model Food Code, which is like the FDA approved code that you have to follow. You have to follow those laws that they put forth in your restaurant. While commonly linked with contaminated ground beef, what pathogens has also been linked with contaminated produce? So which pathogen or what bacteria can you most likely find in contaminated ground beef, which is Escherichia coli, which is a very bad bacteria that is most likely found in ground beef that has been contaminated. So you need to look out for that. If fish, such as tuna, has been time temperature abused, and by time temperature abuse, it means like the food has either been left in the open for too long, or the food hasn't been cooked all the way, or the food hasn't been properly used correctly. Like it hasn't been cooked all the way, or been undercooked, or been cooked too much. Stuff like that. It may cause scombroid poisoning, which is basically like food poisoning, but it happens mostly in fish and like fish that is being served. So you need to be careful of that. That you are cooking the fish to the right temperature, that you're cooking it to the correct amount of time, that you're not leaving it out in the open for too long. That's the best way you can do it to prevent scombroid poisoning. Which action might surely lead to pest infestation? So something that you do that will lead to like insects or raccoons coming to the restaurant, coming inside the restaurant. And that is ensuring spills around garage containers are quickly covered with paper towels. So if you're just like putting paper towels over like messes in the garage or in places where trash is, then you're not actually cleaning the area. You're just covering it up. You should clean and sanitize the area so it doesn't attract any type of insects, roaches, or like small mammals like rats to come. Which of the following foods can be safely reserved from one customer to other customers? And that would be a sealed bottle of hot sauce. If the bottle is sealed, then and it's only being used to like pour like sauces into whatever dish, then it's okay to be passed around. It's okay to be used around. Because it's not like the food is going into the sauce. No, the sauce is just going into the food, and that's its only use. That's only like one-time use. So it's okay for it to be passed around by other people. If hot, potentially hazardous food has been held below 135 degrees Fahrenheit for over 4 hours, it should be. So if food has been left out in the open, in the temperature danger zone, which remember is the zone where most bacteria grow, which is going to be 41 degrees to 135, and it's been held there for more than 4 hours. By the FDA standard, it cannot be held there for more than 4 hours. So it needs to be thrown out. It needs to be discarded. Because by the FDA standard, it cannot be there for more than 4 hours if it's under 135 degrees or higher than 41 Fahrenheit degrees. Which of the following is an example of an air gap? And an air gap is basically like a space where air is that helps facilitate food bacteria that fly in the air. An example of that is an airspace between the drain pipe of a sink and the floor drain. What should the food protection manager tell a food handler if they come to work with diarrhea? So if one of your employees comes to work with diarrhea or seems to be sick, they should go home until their symptoms are gone for at least 24 hours. They cannot come to work. They need to go home and wait until their symptoms have stopped. Which is not a hazard that would require the closure of an operation. So what is something that is not a really big concern? Something that isn't really bad that you need to completely close down the restaurant, which is dry storage area at 75 degrees Fahrenheit. That's okay because remember the temperature danger zone is 41 to 135 degrees Fahrenheit. That's where bacteria grows the most. But bacteria need moisture. They need air to grow. And so dry storage area is where you keep most of your dry food. And bacteria is not going to grow a lot there because there's not a lot of moisture there. So it's okay to keep it at 75 degrees Fahrenheit. It's not something that's a very big concern. What is the purpose of hand antiseptic? Hand antiseptic is kind of like hand sanitizer basically, and it reduces the number of pathogens or bad bacteria on the skin to a safe level. So you're always going to have bacteria on the skin, but it's going to reduce it where it is not very bad. It doesn't affect the food a lot. Under which of the following conditions can you store molluscan shellfish in a display tank? So malls can show fish in a display tank. So like those tanks where they show off like the crab and stuff. In order to do that, you need to get a variance or the approval from your local health department if you want to put like crab or shellfish or mussels on display in those types of tank. What is the first task in training a large group of food handlers on how to prevent contamination of food? So what is the first thing that you should do when you are training your employees on the best way to stop like cross-contamination or just any type of contamination of your food, whether it be chemical or physical? So the first thing that you should do is conduct a needs assessment to determine the training needs of the food handlers. So basically you're trying to find their level, right? You're trying to figure out how much do they know about food prevention. If they know nothing, then you teach them from the start. You teach them on how to clean the food, what to do to keep it away from certain areas, like keep it away from the trash can or something, or stuff like that. Or if they know a lot, then you can just teach them like just like the base, just like what you want them to do if a food contamination does happen, or like you just want them to know like what you expect from them basically. So you don't have to teach them a lot if they already know a lot about food contamination and how to prevent it. So basically you're just trying to figure out how much they know. So you're just trying to conduct an assessment on how much do they know about food prevention and how to handle it. If preparing TCS food, and TCS is time temperature control type of foods, basically where time and temperature are very critical or very important when making or serving this food, like how long you cook it or like how high the temperature you need to cook it basically. Those are what TCS foods are. You just have to be, they're like very considerate, they're very, time and temperature are very important to those types of food. So if preparing TCS food in-house, it must be date marked if it will be held for over how many hours at 41 degrees or lower, Fahrenheit or lower. So if you're serving food and it's being frozen under 41 degrees or lower for over 24 hours, then you need to date mark it. You need to mark it for how long can this food be frozen until it gets contaminated, basically. For how long can this food be held if it is going to be held for 24 hours or more. You have to mark it. You have to like put a label on it. Pathogens are an illness-causing microorganism. And microorganisms are just like bacteria. And so like pathogens, like I said, are bad bacteria that can cause illnesses like food poisoning or stuff like that. Bimetallic stem denometers, which are like just denometers that have like this iron bar that can measure temperature, should be recalibrated, which is like recalibrating is basically when you just fix something, like you fix the measurement on it, or you just check the measurement to make sure like it's measuring everything correctly. And so like those type of thermometers should be recalibrated before every shift or before the day's delivery. So you basically have to make sure like the thermometer is measuring everything correctly basically every day. So like before every shift or before the day's deliveries. If a food handler received a cut on their hand, what must they do to work safely with food? So if like one of your employees, they get a cut from like a knife or something, then that's not a big concern, but they should cover the wound with an impermeable cover, so like the blood shouldn't seep through, and wear a single-use glove as just like an extra protection. So you should wear a glove and put on a bandage to make sure the blood doesn't seep through and doesn't get on the food. All of the following are types of food commonly associated with food allergies, except, so for this question, it'll probably give you a list of common food allergies, like peanuts, soybean, or even like flour, which are common allergies, and then they'll give you an option that's not very common, so they're looking for that option. They're looking for a food allergy that's not very common when they ask you like stuff like except or not a part of blah blah blah. So except melon and melon products. Those aren't very common allergies that you need to look out for. Which of the following is an example of a proper container for garbage? So you're looking for how you should properly contain your garbage. And then they'll probably give you like 3 options that are bad, and then you're looking for the good option. So that would be covered metal or heavy plastic container, because then the bacteria can't easily fly everywhere. When labeling containers of potentially hazardous food before it is stored, all the following information should be included except, so when you're labeling the food product, like you're putting labels on it, you're usually putting like when it should be used by, any allergens that they have in it, like peanuts or stuff like that, or you're putting like when, how long you should heat the food or cook the food. Those are stuff that you would usually put on containers, like labeling food containers, but what you wouldn't put is the name of the person who prepared it. So that's not relevant information. Nobody needs to know the person who like put all the labels on the stuff, or everybody, or the person that prepared the food. That's not relevant information. They just need to know everything related to the food, like for how long you can cook it and stuff. That's all they really need to know. They don't need to know the person behind it. Which step in food preparation reduce the numbers of pathogens to a safe level? So, which step when you're preparing food helps to really decrease that level of bad bacteria? Which is cooking. Cooking is the most efficient. Cooking is the most likely way that you get rid of all that bad, or most of that bad bacteria from that food. What is the maximum distance that sneeze guards can be located from the self-service counter to protect the food from contamination? So how far can you sneeze, like if you really need to sneeze, how far do you need to be away from the food in order to sneeze? And you need to be at least at like 14 inches, like more than a foot away from the food if you really need to sneeze. And if you're going to sneeze into like your arm or something. Food handlers should not eat, drink, smoke, or chew gum or tobacco while prepping food. You do not want to do any of that while you're preparing food, because then that bacteria or that smoke or those chemicals from those products could get in your food, and that's cross-contamination. You're contaminating your food with different, potentially bad, hazardous chemicals. You don't want that. So if you're going to chew, drink, smoke, whatever, do it away from the food that you're preparing. How are the catering personnel off-site notified of use-by dates, times, and reheating instructions for food delivered from the operation? So if you're delivering food and you're not personally there to tell them what they do, what they should do, how will they know, like, when to use the food by or how long to cook the food by? They know because food containers should be labeled with relevant information. So the food, if you did it correctly, the food container should have all the relevant information needed for that other person that you're giving that food to know what they should do to cook or heat or to store the food, because you've labeled everything with the right information. When handling glassware, servers should avoid touching the rim. And the rim is like on a wine glass where people drink, like where the people put their mouths on. That's the rim. You don't want to touch the rim because, that's where people put their mouths on. And even if you're putting your hands on the rim, then even if you wash your hands, bacteria could still spread to that area, and it could spread to the customer, and you don't want that. So you have to avoid touching the rim, and also if you're going to hold the glassware like that, touch the stem, like the place where people normally hold their glass from. What is the proper temperature of a frozen unit? The proper temperature of a frozen unit is below 0 degrees Fahrenheit or at 0 degrees Fahrenheit. So like a frozen unit is like basically a freezer. What temperature should you put your freezer at? It should be 0 degrees Fahrenheit or below. Eggs and peanuts are dangerous for people with which conditions? So think about it. Peanuts are the most food allergies that people have. So, and eggs too. Eggs are also a very common food allergy. So you have to be very careful with eggs and peanuts with people that have food allergies. You need to make sure that none of that, if they're allergic, are in that food. Which of the following is not an example of a critical limit? So a critical limit is basically the point at which bacteria can spread the most, and you're looking for something that is not very concerning, which is not an example of a critical limit, is not an example of a point where bacteria can spread a lot. And that would be a stored uncooked chicken breast at 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Because think about it, the temperature danger zone is 41 to 135 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the temperature danger zone. If it's 41 degrees or below, that's where bacteria most of the time have stopped growing or have slowed down growing. And so that's not a critical limit, because a critical limit is at which point bacteria has the most potential to grow. So when you're freezing the food at 41 degrees Fahrenheit or lower, then that bacteria doesn't have a lot of potential to grow. So it's not a big concern. All new food handlers must receive training in the critical areas of preventing cross-contamination, controlling time and temperature, cleaning and sanitizing, and, most importantly, personal hygiene and staff health control. So your employees should all know this. They should all know how to prevent cross-contamination, or know for how long and what temperature to cook the food, and how to clean and sanitize like their working areas. But they also really need to know how to take care of themselves, know how to wash their hands, know when to wash their hands, know their personal hygiene is very important. Chafing dishes and steam tables are examples of. So like chafing means to add temperature to. So when you're adding temperature to dishes and steam, like making them warmer, That's an example of hot holding equipment because you're making the food warmer. You're hot holding it. Like hot holding it is basically you're just keeping that food warm. Why might infants and young preschool age children be considered a population at higher risk for foodborne illnesses? So it's because like kids, they're very young kids especially, they do not have fully developed immune systems. Their immune system hasn't fully developed to help them fight with diseases and stuff efficiently, like grown adults do. They have a fully grown immune system so they can fight off diseases better. But children, they're still growing and their immune systems are still growing, so they're very susceptible or they're very weak to diseases. So that means they're going to be very weak to foodborne illnesses. A CCP, which is an abbreviation for critical control point, is a step where a hazard can be controlled. Where should kitchen trash containers be cleaned? And when you're cleaning your trash containers or like your trash can, they should be cleaned in an area away from food storage or food preparation areas. The reason is because trash containers probably hold the most bacteria in your kitchen. They probably have the most bacteria growing. And so you don't want that bacteria flying everywhere and going to the food or going to the food. You don't want that. So you want to clean it away from wherever the food is. You have one cutting board in your small kitchen. You have just sliced some chicken breast for cooking and now need to prepare a green salad. What should you do to the cutting board and knife before using them to prepare the salad? So you need to scrub them with hot water and detergent, rinse thoroughly, and then sanitize them. Because when you finish cutting your chicken breast, remember that's a raw food, and that meaning it hasn't been cooked yet, meaning that there's still a lot of bacteria on that food, on that chicken breast potentially. Same with the green salad, it hasn't been cooked, so there could be a lot of bacteria on it. And that's cross-contaminating. You're cross-contaminating the food with things that could potentially have a lot of bacteria on it. So once you're done cutting your chicken breast, you need to clean and sanitize your cooking board before you start cooking or like chopping up that salad. If plant food like rice or beans is heat treated, so heat treated means like it's cooked or it's warmed to a certain degree, then it could be considered a potentially hazardous food because it could go down to the temperature danger zone, which is 135 degrees or lower. So you have to be careful of that, and that it's being controlled to the right temperature so that bacteria isn't most likely to grow. In the process of developing an HCCP plan, which is a health analysis critical control point plan for your restaurant, you have already identified the potential hazards in the flow of food in your establishment and determined where food safety hazards are likely to be. So it's basically saying you already found out what problems could happen in your restaurant regarding food, like where cross-contamination can be, or like what could happen if you don't do something right. So you already found out that part. You already found out about that step. But the next thing you do is determining the critical control points. So you need to determine what you need to do to stop those hazards from happening. What do you need to do to stop those problems from happening? So you already found out, you already identified the problems and when they could happen. Now you need to stop them from happening. You need to have plans on how to stop that. So you need to determine the critical control points. Food handlers should be restricted from handling food if they have all the following symptoms except. So for this question, they're probably going to give you a list of symptoms that you would have to be alarmed by, that you have to keep an eye on, or you need to send a person home for. Like probably like a runny nose, you want to keep them from handling the food, or like they have yellow eyes, then you want to send them home, or they're throwing up, then you want to send them home. But what you don't need to be as concerned by, which is like what they want to know, is coughing. You don't need to be that concerned by coughing, because people coughed like for any reason. They cough because maybe they have something stuck in their throat, or they just need to cough, and that's not something to be super alarmed by. As long as they cough away from the food or like into their arm, then it's okay to let them handle the food. In the heat sanitizing dishwashing machine, what is the minimum temperature for the final rinse? So in a washing machine, what should the final temperature be when it's almost done washing, but it's like they're giving that one final wash? It should be 180 degrees Fahrenheit, because at 180 degrees Fahrenheit, most bacteria are killed, because it's a very high temperature. That's where most bacteria are killed. So that's like the temperature that you want to finish off washing your dishes with. After it was removed from the oven, a casserole was placed on the counter at 4:30 p.m. By what time must any leftover be served or thrown out? So that casserole is a hot food that has been placed in the temperature danger zone, which is 41 degrees, 135 degrees. So it's room temperature. It has been placed on the counter at 4:30 p.m. And it's not in like under a heat lamp or anything like that. So there's nothing to help control the temperature. And by the FDA standard, hot food cannot be out for more than 4 hours. So it should be thrown out by 8:30 p.m. That's when hot food should be thrown out if there's still anything left. And it's going to be 8:30 p.m. What is the correct way to measure the temperature of sealed bulk liquids, such as milk delivered in soft containers? So like sealed bulk liquids is like the things you have in like the drink fridges, like in front of the store, like with all the Capri Suns, the Pepsi, the Coke, the Dr. Pepper. Those are sealed bulk liquids. And the correct way to measure the temperature of those liquids is having a thermometer carefully fold container around thermometer probe or stems. So you need to have a thermometer or something that measures the temperature inside those storage areas. Yellowed skin and eyes should indicate that a person has hepatitis A. So yellow skin and eyes are a clear indicator of somebody that has hepatitis A that you need to be able to look out for. We would use an infrared thermometer to measure what temperature? So you would use an infrared thermometer to measure the surface temperature of a grill we are using, because that's the most correct measurement that you can get if you're like measuring a grill by using an infrared thermometer.